Hey everyone, and welcome to the new episode of Full Funnel Live. As always, every Wednesday. Usually, there are two bold guys chatting about B2B marketing, but today we have a wonderful guest. So we'll just differentiate a little bit our hosts. So today, I'm co-hosting this episode with Ashley Lewin, head of marketing at Aligned, our partners, and I'm super excited about this because we are going to talk about marketing planning uh, and balance and always on programs with experiments and with short-term ROI programs. And I couldn't think about a better guest. So Ashley, thanks a lot for joining me.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to chat with everybody.
So before we'll dive deeper, guys, let us know, please, in the chat, what's your role in your organization, right? Something like demand gen, ABM, head of marketing, CMO, VP of marketing, SDR. Just let us know. So during the chat, we'll maybe share examples that would be more relevant for your specific role. So let us know, please. And what we are going to chat about today. And by the way, thanks everybody for sharing some questions up front that helped us to create the narrative and the questionnaire for today's chat. So what we are going to chat about, GTM Focus Cycles. I know you mentioned once that you are not a big fan of creating trademarks for the frameworks, but I think this is a cool one, and it would be definitely great to learn from you about this framework, balance and always on and strategic programs, budgeting, forecasting. So let's dive deeper, and let's start a bit with this GTM focus cycles. Would be great if you can explain the concept.
Yeah, absolutely. So, go-to-market focus cycles or GTM focus cycles, it's something I just kind of coined while writing a LinkedIn post. I love frameworks and I love, as a marketer, I love branding things and making things feel unique. And so I joked, maybe I need to trademark this. But really, what it is it's just a way to focus on a certain subset of your revenue plan. So tis the season right now for planning across the org and across the business. I personally love this time of year and I love planning, so I'm so excited to geek out with all of you on this. But this could happen at any time in the year where you do what I call these GTM focus cycles. And so it's taking your revenue plan. So most people are going to have the traditional Excel spreadsheet where you're breaking down from a business perspective of we need to hit X in revenue. And obviously you'll have your new business, your expansion, sales, if you're doing PLG or self-serve, like these are all going to be broken out, right? And then you're going to have variables that will go into making that up. So you start from you're kind of doing it from a top down where you're taking it from the revenue and you're going to have your conversion rates, or you're going to have your inputs like our ACV equals X, our sales cycle is X, our opt to close one is X, or your win rate. And then even like lead to opt conversion rate, things like that. And so typically, when you come to planning, this is a way that I like to approach planning as well, which I can get into, is what I have seen with a lot of companies, and I've helped, it's been over 30 plus companies at this point. I've been in 30 plus different Salesforce instances as well, working in an agency setting, but now I'm in-house, where basically we come to planning and we expect everything to increase all at once, like almost overnight. Like you're doing this plan in Q4 and Q1, all of a sudden you have a much higher win rate. Your ACV magically is much higher. Your conversion rates are up higher, et cetera. And so it's really hard to create focus and impact a metric when you're trying to impact them all, because something like an ACV is not an easy fix. Like that takes a lot of strategic work to really impact. Same with decreasing your sales cycle or improving your conversion rate. So it's really hard to improve everything at once. When it comes to go-to-market focus cycles, let's say you're in Q4. I'm sure most of us are having these conversations of, hey, we have a month plus left, depending on if you're on fiscal cycles or not. How do we bridge the gap of where we want to be and where we are currently? And instead of all of us just focusing, you have your CS team, you have your sales team, you have your marketing team, et cetera. Instead of us all focusing on our individual inputs, is there a way to rally the go-to-market team and focus on one piece in general? Let's say that you notice that expansion, like we have some opportunity, like sales is forecasting lower this quarter. Like, let's be realistic. There's the opportunity, like you should be opportunistic and excited and look for the positive in it. But then there's the realist of, we're forecasting that there's going to be a delta here. Where else in the business could we do a bigger lift? Maybe that's on expansion. Okay, well, let's rally the troops and let's focus on expansion here. Okay, when it comes to expansion, is there a certain metric in here that we could all impact? Is it that we need to decrease the sales cycle, from, we have a lot that's maybe forecasted for Q1. Is there anything we can do to bring it in here? Really, it's just shining like a spotlight on something that you could really focus on as a go-to-market team to really impact that. You could also run like mini campaigns is what I've said as well. Let's say it's not Q4. Let's say you're going into Q1 and you're noticing this opportunity. I would say a way to flag this is you're doing your forecasts, you're looking at all the different places. You are betting that, in order to, when I like to do planning, there's the goal spreadsheet. And that's where you need to go. And then I like to do a forecast one where if everything remained the same, where would you end up at the end of the year? And then you're going to have the delta between the two. And then you could even do a couple of simulations of, here's my best case scenario, and here's maybe my realist scenario, and here's the worst case scenario. But you need to know what that delta is. And then you could say, okay, we have a pretty big delta. We're going to take a bet and focus on one of these inputs. And let's say we have flagged expansion. I'm just going to keep picking on expansion right now. We have flagged that expansion could be great. Maybe you're a demand gen marketer. You're coming in, or you're in the campaigns and marketing. You own the campaign piece of it. You're flagging different campaigns that you could do to drive that up. So there's just different ways. I think to sum this all up, it's really just about creating focus and alignment on certain areas of the forecast and the revenue model to really make an impact.
I'm just wondering, when you say we as a GTM team, who should be a part of that GTM team? Because the truth is, right, in many organizations, I think the alignment is way far from what you have at Aligned, right? So
Sure.
Lots of teams are working in silos, and it's not that easy to bring, let's say, different stakeholders of the client-facing teams. So from your experience, let's say, what is the squad of this GTM team? Who should be a part of it?
Yeah, absolutely. So it should be your executive team. So your CEO, for instance, if you have a CRO, obviously your head of sales, head of marketing, head of CS, depending on what the titles are. But anyone who owns the attract, the convert, and then the expand part of your revenue model. So I think those three, along with an executive sponsor like your CEO, who should be driving that GTM alignment, is critical to have that conversation. Now, depending on your org structure and the size of your company, it'll waver on who's in that room. Maybe it's a little bit lower or higher. It truly just depends on the org structure.
Yeah, makes sense. Thank you. So from that perspective, who should own the process? Who should initiate the conversation? Because again, sometimes there could be a person who is the loudest person in the room, right? Or the person who has, I don't know, I'll explain it, maybe high credibility, or a person who is more egocentric and is just pushing himself or herself forward, say, just sharing the opinions as the ultimate truth, right? So from your experience, who should own this, and what data should be in place just to have the meaningful discussion?
Yeah. So it depends. I hate giving that answer, but it truly does kind of depend on the uniqueness of your org. Typically, I've seen the marketing leader really own this, mostly because they're the most exceptional internal communicator, in my opinion. If you're in marketing, you should be exceptional at communication. And also marketing has a stake in it more than, like obviously sales has a piece of the stake, CS has a piece of it, but marketing will truly impact all pieces of it, especially if you have a complex makeup of sales plus self-service. So I would say not to give marketers more work, but I would say the marketing leader should definitely have maybe be the driving force here, but that you're not doing it alone. It should be a collaborative effort between all of your counterparts to really build this consensus together.
Let's then stick to this narrative. Let's say you mentioned a couple of times we want to focus on expansion, right? This would be our priority motion. So let's stick to this example. Now, let's say if we want to focus on expansion, we start planning marketing, and we have brand campaigns, right? Or let's say brand building programs. We have always on programs. Like you said, we might have strategic programs, and we might have some experiments as well, something new that we want to try, and maybe some short-term ROI programs. So what's your approach to balancing all of this?
Yeah, so when it comes to planning for the new year, how do you balance like your always on programs, your experiments? Like how do you put that? Okay, cool. This is a fun one. This is like figuring out the puzzle pieces to your beautiful puzzle. So I look at it as like, okay, so I break it into foundations and programs and then experiments. So your foundational work is things that you should always be doing to fuel your programs. That'd be like your content strategy, it would be product marketing, it could be your brand building, so design, brand voice, etc. So you have all these foundations, and content will be probably the biggest one here. And that's what fuels your programs, and your programs are where essentially you're distributing all of this. So I look at LinkedIn as a singular program. Now you could have tactics or initiatives, and then tactics within that program. So initiative could be executive thought leadership, employee advocacy, influencers, paid, your company page, and then you could have many little tactics underneath there as well. So for instance, influencers, you could have multiple tactics. Like we have very tactical influencers we're going to use, and then we have like entertaining, we call it, we'll see if I can say it correctly, edutainment, like educational entertainment. That could be another tactic underneath there. But you truly need to know what is your programs that are always delivering. And let's say, like if you have a self-reported how did you hear about us field on your forms, you're going to most likely see it at a program level like LinkedIn. You may see some of the initiatives come in there like, oh, I saw, Ashley's post or someone else's post, but typically you're going to bucket it all underneath LinkedIn. You'll want to grow that program, and then you can make small bets underneath of there from an initiative and tactic standpoint. But keep investing in the programs that are already delivering. These are your always on programs, right? You could have some experiments nestled underneath of them. And then I like to budget at least 20 to, it depends, like 10 to 20% of your budget and your time on experiments. So let's say like an experiment for us right now has been events and webinars. So 10 to 20% of our time and budget has been dedicated to that. You need to have a set amount of time that you're running this experiment. For us, it's been about 6 months. Deem if it is worthy to be like an always on program, and then you would move it into that category. So that's something that we're doing currently. And so it started off as like that 10 to 20% experiment, then moves into the ongoing programs. And then within those ongoing programs, you have ways to expand them as well. So when I'm looking at how we're going to be doing this, you obviously start with your goal. So we need to deliver X in revenue. That means X from self-service, X from sales, etc. And then attribution does come into this of how do we walk to that number, knowing that attribution is just more of a compass. It's not like telling you exactly what you need to do, but it helps you walk to that number. And we can see that where it comes to the programs, and we could say, usually our program LinkedIn delivers 60% of that goal. Okay, well, that means that we need to deliver X from this program. And that's how you can start backing into it, but also knowing that attribution is flawed in so many different ways, but it just kind of gives you that compass to get there. Would you like me to go into any of the specifics, or did that help?
So the first question, one of them you have already addressed, was how much time and budget you should allocate to experiments and always on programs. Another one that I would love to ask you is about planning the capacity, because I think it's especially, I mean, marketing teams are usually under-resourced, let's be honest, right? There is not enough bandwidth to execute everything that we actually would love to execute as marketers. So with that in mind, we have always on programs, right? And then how to plan realistically how many, let's say, experiments, how many new tactics can we deploy, not to overwhelm our team, and also avoid the situation when everybody does just the bare minimum, but we ignore the full playbook.
Oh my gosh, this is one of the hardest pieces of the job, in my opinion. And I feel like maybe this is exclusive to marketers that I have worked with, but we always like to say yes to too many things or overload our plates. I joke that, if you're stressed in marketing, why not just add more to your plate? But this is something that I'm constantly trying to get better at. I don't know if I have the perfect example or explanation for it, and it's something that I'm trying to figure out. One thing that I have typically had a philosophy on is before you hire for a program or a need, you first need to prove it out for yourself first. So that means maybe you're not the expert at LinkedIn or whatever it may be, or webinars, etc. But could you do an MVP experiment to test it? Because the last thing you would like to do is hire someone that's an expert to run the program and it doesn't work for your brand, or your company, etc., or your audience. And so you need to prove it first. Once you have seen that MVP has started to deliver some of the results, then that's when it comes into, I think we need to hire for this so that we have the capacity to keep supporting this program. Now, that could also look like you're hiring freelancers, agencies. There's obviously multiple ways to staff a program. It truly depends. I have been doing heavier on the outsourcing on freelancers and agencies for certain programs because, to be honest, it's actually, I think, easier and a little bit more cost effective to have really, really, really good experts to run these that are off on their own now. Like, for instance, paid media is something that we continuously outsource and get some of the best out there. But so all this to say, you first need to prove it out in an experiment plan. I have been toying with sprints with my team right now, where we have our weekly department meetings and we use Asana and we go through the work and we look at, okay, out of all of this, the work we have, one, does it seem doable? Do we feel like we can do it? And who could add more to their plate? I feel like, especially in a small startup, you may have a specialty, like you may run the influencer program, but you have to be able to roll up your sleeves and do other work as well. It's just the nature of being a part of a startup, is that you wear many hats. And I think that's the beautiful part about it. So it's, for instance, we're doing a huge video launch soon with a really nice announcement coming soon, TBD. And our head of influencers and social is helping us with the video. He's helping us scout locations, write the video script, etc. That's what I would say as rolling up the sleeves. As we approached it as a marketing team, we said this big launch is coming. How do we divvy out the work, knowing that we'll all have to do something that's outside of our job description? But we're having those conversations and we're saying, okay, if we say yes to this, what do we say no to instead? So that no one is being overworked either. Everyone should leave the meeting feeling like they agreed to the work. So it's all of us looking at what the current work is that we have, what work we would like to bring in. Like, there's a couple of experiments that are slated for December that we have on our plate. One of them is expanding our webinars. Another one is bringing in a newsletter. And so we'll bring that in. We had the conversation when we did quarterly planning of, these are the experiments we would like to agree to as a team because of X data, X intuition, whatever it may be. And then we try and plan out, okay, well, this is all the work that we have in the quarter. We can't get to that until December. And it's a little bit of gut. You're just trying to figure out when you can bring it in. And then we'll all bring it in December, or when that time comes, divvy out the work that way, etc.
I love it. It actually reminds me a lot about the Scrum methodology, which in a nutshell about planning the sprint with clear deliverables and goals and outcomes, and then having weekly meetings because it's all about being agile, right? Sometimes you see that something really works and it seems that you crack the code, right? And it makes perfect sense to double down on certain activities and maybe postponing a few things that you had in the plan. Or sometimes you clearly see that a few things are not working the way you were expecting, right? That it just makes sense to refocus and maybe restructure the tasks that you have planned. So being agile, I think it's crucial, and like you said, it's all about rolling out the sleeves and just making sure that the team is focused on the ultimate goal, right? Making sure that we achieve the success and not about it's not my job. I think the biggest takeaway and also maybe the problems that the organizations are facing is the mindset of it's not my work, right? It's not my responsibility. It's not my job. So, but it's all also about it's another story about management, leadership, culture, etc.
Yeah, I worked for a company. We were 1,000+ employees, so very large company, very specialized roles. And I remember vividly that if you said that's not my job, you were like, we joked you'd be in trouble because even at a large 1,000+ employee, if it's not your role, I mean, I think we can always support the business or find ways to get to the person who would own it. But yeah, that's not my job mindset can be very troublesome.
Yeah, absolutely right. I actually came from enterprise world as well. So after 8 years in our enterprise organizations, it was the thing that you learn the hard way. It's just basically figuring out who can actually do that job, and it was. It's something that, yeah, I believe doesn't matter what is the size of your organization, but if a person leads the department, this is something that you need to fix as soon as possible. Otherwise, making a progress would be really, really tough. Coming back to planning,
Mhm.
obviously, we're all in B2B, which means that anyhow, do we want this or no, we need to involve sales.
Mhm.
So to create the cross-functional playbooks, right?
Mhm.
What's your process here? How do you plan the cross-functional activities together with sales? How do you involve them, and how do you explain what would be their role and responsibility, and making sure that they would actually execute what has been agreed?
Yeah. First of all, making sales one of your dearest friends in the org is critical to creating that alignment. I feel like we hear a lot about what I call smarketing alignment or meetings. Yeah. And so I think first it comes with building that relationship over time. It's not like you're just going to pull up a seat next to them and say, "Let's be best friends," but it's building that relationship together over time. I like to ask whenever I start in a new org, what are your biggest challenges? How can marketing support you? And start finding out ways that way. One of the ways I was able to bridge that alignment and build a huge initiative or project here at Aligned was when I first started, I heard a problem, and that was primarily on the lead handoff process between marketing and sales. This is a critical one that I think most orgs actually do have a pretty big problem with, and that can always be optimized. Like if you're looking for low hanging fruit, I despise that saying it. I say it. This is a quick way to do that. And so we did a cross functional project where we brought in a RevOps agency and we were able to fix that lead handoff process. And then also it impacts, that lead to opportunity conversion rate, which obviously impacts pipeline. So when it comes to, looking, that wouldn't be necessarily like I was looking at an annual planning view, is more a little bit, this was in Q1, looking at the year and just kind of some ad hoc, agile ways to plan some impact. But if you're looking at annual planning, it's I think having a conversation with your sales counterpart of here's what the goal is. I think first you need that Excel or whatever growth revenue model to be able to align this conversation of here's our growth goals, here's where our forecast is if everything stays the same, here's the delta. What are your thoughts? Like, how do we bridge this delta between, usually it's a really large delta too, if you're in an audacious company, which most of us in B2B marketing or B2B are. And so you're having that conversation of, here's the delta, what are your thoughts? And then just starting that conversation there. And then aligning on what that big bet is. Okay, well, we need to bring a RevOps agency in to fix the lead handoff process. Great, what does that look like in terms of champions between the two teams? Like, do I need your sales enablement or sales ops person to help with this? How do we factor that into their time? Does my marketing ops person need to be a part of this? Or whatever it looks like. You just need to agree to what that huge initiative is and why it's important. When you're looking at that annual plan. And I think it just starts with having, looking at the delta and then having the conversation of what do you think the biggest impact is and how do we make it work between the two teams?
I love it. Any thoughts on the case that potentially lots of teams might be facing? Let's say you co-create the plan. You have defined the key initiatives and tactics. And then how to make sure that sales actually execute what has been planned, what
Sure.
you have, let's say, the part that you distributed to them or assigned to them.
Yeah, absolutely. Before I go into that, there was a comment in the chat that I think is critical and I did not touch from Adrienne, KPIs and shared metrics. I think this is super important because my belief in marketing is that marketing and sales should always have the same, similar KPIs. Like obviously you're going to have a division between it, but when I look at the impact of marketing, I look at revenue first, like that's the lagging indicator, right? But I like to back up against then qualified pipeline. So if I'm doing my job well in marketing, our qualified pipeline should increase. And so that's music to their ears as well, because that impacts their quotas, their goals as well. So having shared metrics and KPIs is critical for the alignment. And if you have competing KPIs, you're going to butt heads. And this is where a lot of orgs, I think, have this issue of how do you align the two departments? You need to be on the shared metrics and KPIs, because unless the metrics change, your behaviors and your work support whatever metric that you're trying to impact. So I think that's critical. In terms of making sure accountability from the two departments is realized, I think this is helpful just from like an operational standpoint. Like for instance, let's say you're doing a lead handoff project, like that's the initiative that you agreed to between the two teams. Often that's that really fuzzy gray area. I like to, create an owner for the project, like just like simple things like owner for the project, a project management, like maybe you're just working out of a spreadsheet, maybe you work out of Asana, who knows? A shared Slack channel, I feel like is super helpful. If you do need a weekly cadence of just, stand-ups or whatever it may be, but creating that Slack channel and just like the rituals of that you would normally do in any type of marketing project campaign, I think is super helpful for anything cross-collaborative as well, because it just keeps everybody aligned, but also accountable as well. So it's just like simple operational things that I think can really help keep everybody on track.
And out of curiosity, you mentioned that you have weekly meetings with your marketing team. Do you invite sales for these meetings, or you just stick to, let's say, monthly and quarter alignment meetings?
Yeah, so this is only for the marketing team at the current moment. Marketing meetings have been just kind of like a work in progress to figure out the right cadence. I've been in orgs where the sales and marketing leaders meet once a week, and it's just like a quick touch base. I know that we don't always want more meetings, but sometimes these are helpful just to have that accountability as well. And it's a shared agenda. You have set metrics, a set topic that you're always talking about. You're checking in on a core project, because as leaders, sometimes having that meeting is helpful just for accountability too. So I've had where it's like weekly with the sales and marketing leaders. It's a set agenda, set metrics that you're looking at. Monthly with could be like more of like the monthly performance reviews, where you're meeting with the sales and marketing team, and then also bringing in CS when applicable too, depending on what the topic is, where you're looking over the results from the month, and then you're saying, okay, what do we do with this? I think weekly it's like a small pulse check. Monthly, you're getting a bigger pulse check. Quarterly is when you're making the bigger strategic decisions. I would never make anything off of a monthly one. You need to see something at trend at least 3 months. And then quarterly is typically when I would see the greater sales and marketing org have a shared meeting, and it needs to have a very set topic, otherwise those can go off the rails a little bit. I've also seen them monthly too. It just really depends on your org. And then been part of organizations too where marketing is invited to sales weekly calls as well if we have a campaign that's upcoming. So if we're launching a huge ABM campaign, brand campaign, whatever it may be, getting that invite to the sales weekly call so that they can see what their prospects may be seeing in the market. I have found those just kind of like ad hoc opportunities super helpful too.
Love it. Thank you. You mentioned a couple of times different channel tactics, let's say LinkedIn, working with influencers, executive thought leadership, paid, etc. So as we spoke, there are long-term programs. And also some experiments you mentioned could be 6 months experiments. So what I'm wondering is, how do you measure the efficiency of long-term programs, especially the new ones, and how do you report on them?
Yeah, such a great question, and always a fun one to try to figure out. So experiments, I always like to have a goal assigned to them before you kick them off. So for instance, we recently did a pretty big brand LinkedIn campaign called Ghosted Hotline. The goal was truly, we saw an opportunity for more brand awareness in LinkedIn. We had gone a little quiet. And so the goal was to be as loud as possible and to drive reach on LinkedIn. Great, that's the goal of the campaigns. Then you always need to assign your KPIs, or how you will measure success, and where you're measuring that success from as well. So for this one, it could be impressions, it could be reach, it could be self-reported mentions of the campaign. It could be influence pipeline. I think sometimes influenced metrics get a bad rap, but they do have a place in certain pieces of it. So that's how we define something that technically is very long-term focused. Like a brand campaign, you do a run at it, right? But the overall goal for a brand campaign is to drive results 6 months, a year plus from now, because that's how the buying journey works. You can't just, someone knows about you for the first time and they're going to purchase. It's a longer term one, but we knew that that's the goal of it. Brand should always be something that's enticing long-term results, but we need to balance it. Like you have your, like there's historical ways of saying like create demand, capture demand, but you need to have a split there. If you're only working on optimizing, capturing your demand and nothing on creating your demand, you're going to see the pain of that eventually. And so that's just kind of how I run marketing as well, is that you should have a brand play and you should have a conversion play. So this was the brand play. Let's say, let's use another one as example. LinkedIn executive thought leadership. So you want to get your CEO posting on LinkedIn. Our CEO currently posts on LinkedIn. He's a huge lead driver for us. I feel very thankful to be part of an org where the CEO is bringing in a lot of leads for us, makes it fun, and definitely helps. But I'll give you a spoiler. He's been at this for, I think, 1.5 years, maybe 2 years. I was looking at the impact. It took a couple of quarters to see impact, and now it's insane. But it took multiple quarters to see those results. And so if you're bringing out a campaign, you need to know that you can't see the results of it right away, and you need to know what that time window is before you rip the Band-Aid and say this wasn't a good experiment. You need to have those parameters in place ahead of time, and understanding what these channel tactics, like how long they may take. Executive thought leadership will probably take 6 months to a year to see initial results. Then you'll start to see those initial results and then the bigger results that come from it. So I think it all just depends on what you're trying to do, identifying the goal of it, identifying how you're going to measuring it, and then how you're going to see it long term. But it is hard because I think a lot of times a lot of marketers want to do these big creative brand plays. But if you look at it in your revenue model, it could technically, if you're measuring in period CAC or ROI, it could throw that off hypothetically because you're investing so much higher up here that you're not going to see the realization of that performance for 6 months to a year. And if you're measuring it in quarterly views, it's going to throw that off. So I think that's part of the planning process as well is, typically, let's say you're going to have to double, triple, whatever it may be in a year. The goals always get higher, right? And what you're doing now isn't going to be, you're not going to be able to reach that goal later on. So I always say marketing should be focused multiple quarters, if not a year, on the performance that you want to get. So wherever we want to be in 2026, we should be doing now, right? And so you're having those conversations of, in order to reach that goal that we want in 2026, we need to have a higher CAC or whatever your ROI may be. Like, it's going to raise right now, but it will even out over time as we right size it. But we do need to raise that or decrease the efficiency right now in order to reach our goals long term as well.
Love it. So I think that leads us to the forecasting and budgeting. Ultimately, what's your approach to forecast the efficiency of these programs? And I remember you mentioned that you have, let's say, 2 spreadsheets and trying to see the delta. So the most important question is how to forecast how efficiently your programs will perform. So what are your thoughts?
Oh, this is the hardest one. Possibly, I was going to say fun, but I would be sarcastic there. It's really hard. And so I like to look at marketing as a ecosystem and a collective engine versus if we were to only look at LinkedIn, I'm just going to keep picking on LinkedIn here. Let's say LinkedIn is how we want, like, how much do we invest over here? Well, if you only look at attribution, you're missing the beauty of that channel as well and all of the untrackable attribution. So if you're saying, okay, we need to drive X amount of leads or opportunities, typically our cost per acquisition, if you have your lead source of it from LinkedIn, is X. That's not the whole picture. And so instead, I like to look at marketing holistically first of, let's back into the budget from a CAC perspective. Like, let's say the marketing CAC or the program CAC is X, okay? Well, we need to drive X amount of customers with X ACV to reach our revenue target. That's the first step, right? That means we need to spend X amount on programs. Okay, then from there, it's a different conversation of how you spread that out. I don't know if it gets as scientific at this level then, because it's a little bit more of taking your attribution information as more of that compass and understanding directional insights you're getting. And I would say a little bit of it is intuition and gut feel too, is knowing the goals of, we have an awareness issue. That means we need to spend a little bit more over here, or we want to reserve 20% for experiments, or we know that we see a correlation that when we scale LinkedIn ads by X, that we see a increase in ops of X. So it's a little bit of like puzzle pieces to get to the program split then, and then also ensuring that you have a healthy balance between the awareness and then also the conversion.
Thank you. We have a couple of questions from our community. People shared them upfront, so I would love just to go through them. There was a good question from Jan. What are your thoughts on zero-based planning or continuing and improving of what you have been doing, let's say, this year? So basically, are you starting from scratch or you just build on what you have been running?
Yeah, so making sure I understand this, like when it comes to planning, is it like I'm starting from scratch, like rethinking everything, or do I just keep compounding? Okay. Yeah, I like to compound. So it's a continuation with additional bets that I place on top of it. So looking again at that forecast model of what our targets are, what our current programs are, you're going to see a point of diminishing return on some of these programs or spend as well. So knowing rough estimate of when you might see that, and so that you can invest in other areas as well. So I would say it's a continuation of these ongoing, always on programs that are delivering you your results, knowing if you're getting close to the point of diminishing returns in that cap. And then also then layering on top the new piece of it, which would be the new bets or experiments that you would like to place to be able to reach the additional growth that you need to get to.
Another question from Javier. I would like to set up the KPIs and OKRs across the team for a specific channel. So let's pick LinkedIn. You mentioned it a couple of times. So what would be your approach? And you have different programs, right? Influencers, executive thought leadership, paid media. Obviously, the KPIs should be different. So how do you manage this?
Yeah, so I like to do a rolling effect or like a waterfall when it comes to goal setting. So you first need to start with your company OKRs. Everything should ladder up to the company OKRs. Then you have your department OKRs, then you have your team OKRs, then you have your individual OKRs. But they all ladder up to that big OKR system that you have at the company level. Maybe it's not OKRs, maybe it's just goal setting, but I find this really important because then it aligns everybody and aligns these programs into it as well. So let's say, we want to be the number one in our category. Like maybe that's an OKR we have. And then we're choosing the programs and how they support that as well. So maybe it's, reaching a scale on LinkedIn or whatever it may be. Other ways I've approached this as well is saying LinkedIn has delivered X. We need to deliver X in the new year. Okay, great. That has a number attached to it. I think goals are always very critical to have the way that you're going to measure it with. So let's say we need to get increase or double the amount of either direct attribution or how did you hear about us mentions from LinkedIn in the next year. Great, that's the way we're going to measure it. And then we have the individual tactics that would ladder up into that. So it could be we want to explore influencers and scale to X influencer base. It could just be execution focus. I think execution focus goals often get overlooked, but sometimes you just need to build the muscle. Let's say you want to build webinars. We need to execute 15 webinars in the new year, whatever that could be, because you also need to sometimes just execute and build the muscle. Not everything needs to have like, it's going to drive X amount in revenue or whatever it could be, but we know that it does. It's part of that marketing ecosystem and it's the content strategy as well.
Perfect, thank you. Another question from Beryl, how to get approval for the experiments?
Yeah, this is another really, really good one. Oh, I have been very fortunate. I will admit that I've been very fortunate to be part of orgs where they also believe in this. But if you are not, or even if you are, it's still a tricky one, right? Because everybody likes to see, okay, I'm going to give you $20,000 or whatever the percentage or amount is. What do I get with this? I think it comes a little bit with some education when you are pitching it. I think you need to have a really strong business case ready to go on hand for this. I look at growth as like a stair-step approach. Like you get onto one step and then you hit a plateau and then you need to go up and then you're going to hit another plateau. As much as we would love it to be the beautiful up and to the right graph, it just isn't. And so you can explain that in order to get to that next stair-step of growth, we need to do something new. And in order to find out what that next stair step of growth is, we need to do experimentation to figure out what it is, because you just have no idea what that next stair step of growth is. I think usually when you put a percentage on it, like 10 to 20%, it seems less daunting as well. But I think you just need to have that business case, explain, and the education I think is critical to get that buy-in. And it depends on what your role is. If you are more on the manager, not the director, head, VP, et cetera, then you're having that conversation with your direct manager. If you're on the leadership level, it's with the executive team, whatever it looks like. But I think it truly just comes down to effective persuasion of and education of why this is needed. I think oftentimes we just kind of skip that piece of it, and understanding who you're pitching it to. You need to understand who you're communicating with. If it's the CFO, know what they care about, what questions they're going to have, and speak to them. If it's the CEO, know what questions they're going to have, what may fire them up, etc. But I think just explaining that you need to find that next stair step of growth because there's this X delta in your forecast and goal, and this is how we're going to figure out how to achieve that.
We have a great question from Rebecca, but before we'll cover this one, I would love to ask you a follow-up question. You mentioned that it's essential to prepare internal business cases just to get the buy-in to run the program and get the budget and resources approval, right? So I'm just wondering, let's say, how do you see the structure of this business case? So what are the most important, let's say, parts? What do you need to present? You mentioned the delta, the reason why we want to launch it, right? What else? What do you put into this business case?
Yeah, I just opened one in the background as we were talking of one that I recently drafted up for my chief product officer. And I know what's important to him. And so I always like to start with them with context, like why this matters, what it is, like give that information that they might not be aware of. So it's like the overview section, you could call it. And then I have an objective, a hypothesis. I even have experiment design in this, risks and mitigations, expected outcomes, a decision framework, and a summary. This one I would say is a little bit more lengthy than most need to be. I think the most important thing is to put a monetary estimate on these of, like, for instance, we were trying to move a meeting. This is completely different, but we were trying to move a meeting or a structure, and we calculated, okay, of all the people involved in this meeting, it's costing us X in company revenue. We could be doing Y instead. So always backing up to that monetary amount, I think, is critical. But I think with a business case, you need to know who you're presenting to, because it should change all the time. But the overview, why now, the implication of not doing anything, the monetary amount, your hypothesis, how you're going to measure results, the time frame, resources needed, anything like that. I think all of those are critical inputs into that business case.
Love it. And I think this question from Rebecca is a great follow-up as well. So do you find that if you make a bet, put resource and budget behind it, and the experiment doesn't deliver the results as expected, it damages credibility of future approvals, and how do you navigate that?
Oh, Rebecca, this is such a good question, by the way. Thank you for asking this. I think most of us marketers have this in the back of our mind when we are doing these, right? I would say, I think it's like 90% of your experiments are not going to work. And that's expected, because it's an experiment at the end of the day. As much as we would like to bat 10 out of 10, it just doesn't happen. So I think it comes with framing the experiment too. Like, an experiment truly is, we are experimenting with this. We don't know if it's going to work. This is our best guess. And so I think you need to preface this when you are pitching it, that this is an experiment. I'm not sure if it's going to work. This is my hypothesis. If anything, in business, we're all taking calculated bets. No matter where you're at in the org, you're taking calculated bets. This is another calculated bet, right? And just letting them know, this may work, this may not work, and here's what we'll do with the lessons. I think if you fail at it, and it's not even fail, I would say if it did not work, that's a better way to put it. You need to learn from it and then apply it for the next experiment, but making sure that you're also, when you're pitching an experiment, also pitching an experimentation mindset is critical. In order to find that next step of growth, we have to try a lot of different things. 1 out of 10 of these experiments may work, but when we hit that 1 out of 10, that's when you're going to see that nice spike in growth and figure out how to scale us to the next level. I think that's critical.
I love it. And I think I left this question just to cover it at the end of our chat. And it's a sad one for me because I hate when marketing is perceived as sales order takers or arts and crafts or cost center or whatever, whatever definition you'll put to marketing. But anyhow, so we got this question from Karen. How do you avoid marketing being seen as order takers from both sales and product marketing? And how do you speak to issues of resource capacity with the executives?
Oof. I mean, I feel like we all have felt this at some point in our career. If not, even if you're at a beautiful, amazing org, you still feel it, right? So Karen, this is a really great question. It's a work in progress, I think. One thing is, I think you need to have, I think marketing and an org needs to have a seat at the table with all of the leaders to be able to be an equal first and foremost. So I think it starts with executive culture of making sure that you're not just an order taker. The other one that I have noticed is marketing could do a better job coming up with the plan and their recommendations proactively quicker. Because if you do not give that recommendation, someone will give it to you. They'll give the plan to you if you are not proactively giving that to them. I think another one is setting the norms for the culture within your org and your company of how you take inputs. I think sales and product sales is, let's just use sales, is critical. Like I want all the feedback from sales, but I think it can become overwhelming when you're constantly getting asked for a one-sheeter or a case study or whatever it may be. It can start to feel overwhelming if the feedback is coming in so frequently. So I have found that creating a intake form or feedback form is super helpful, and then following up with them. And then if you tell them no, you tell them why you're not bringing it in. I think it's critical to give them that inside view of, hey, if we were to bring this in, that means we have to say no to this, which has the impact of XYZ. But always making sure they feel welcomed with giving input is critical. I think it's actually more worrisome if your sales is not giving you requests or feedback, because it means that they're not as open. And I think them having that direct line to your customers and your prospects, so important, because they understand what's resonating, how the customer is speaking. Like this is all super important aspects to deliver into your marketing. But I think it comes down to like the norm that you have of how you intake requests and feedback. So I think a form is always super helpful. Make it as simple as possible. Like there's so many different AI ways to do this to make it super simple too, and to sort through it. Historically, we had a marketing channel, and then the feedback went into a form that was pinned in there, and that fed into Asana. And then we reviewed all the inputs on our weekly project management cadence. And then now it's more ad hoc right now. I get a lot of requests, and I either say like, absolutely, we'll bring this in the next month, or I will say, hear you, that's super important. However, that's not on our current roadmap of work because of XYZ. I think if you're ever going to tell them no, you need to tell them why. And I think the other important piece is to have your plan ahead of time, so that you're not given a plan, and then making sure that it's very transparent and visible and communicated to all the stakeholders. So I like to showcase the marketing plan in a public channel. Like this is, hey, it's Q4. This is our Q4 plan as a marketing team because of XYZ. I think that's super important. I think a lot of times this comes down to visibility and communication as well.
Love it. Thank you so much. Just to wrap it up, if you could give your best advice, because we have covered it a lot, what would be the one thing that would make, from your point of view, would make your marketing planning much better and much more efficient in next year?
Ooh, okay, good question to end on. I think that you need to understand your delta and all of the inputs and all of the ways that these inputs affect the goal. So like understanding your conversion rates and how much that can affect it. I think having models that you can play with to factor that is super important, because it's not always a black and white way to plan. At the end of the day, your top line revenue is the end goal, right? All of these inputs are just ways to ladder up to that bigger goal. So if you know how to kind of like dial up certain inputs, I think it can lead to some really interesting planning and information, and also understand how your work can impact those variables or inputs to dial up or down something. And then I think also understanding so that's a huge piece of it. And then also knowing what your always on ongoing programs and campaigns are, and then how you're going to be utilizing that, and then reserving time and budget for the experiments quarterly, I think is also a way to make it less painful throughout the year.
Love it. Thank you so much. So with that being said, thanks a lot for coming and sharing your wisdom with us. I think there were tons of great examples, and thanks a lot for being open and sharing how you actually do it. And thanks a lot for everybody for joining this episode and asking fantastic questions. This helps us to make this episode actionable and helpful for you. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Ashley. And see you in the next episodes, guys. Take care, everybody. Cheers.
Thank you.